Logan County, West Virginia, June 21st, 1932. Many residents of the county are glued to their radios, enthralled by the long-awaited heavyweight title fight between Max Schmeling and Jack Sharkey. Radio, although still something of a novelty, has become a welcome guest in the homes that line the roads and hollows of this rural coal-producing region. For many, it provides a much-needed diversion from the grimness of everyday life in these early days of the Great Depression, a depression that was to hit the West Virginia coalfields as hard as anywhere. As the blow-by-blow account of the match is blared over the airwaves, it may have inadvertently served to divert the attention of local residents from a far more heinous event happening in their own backyard. At some point, after the sun had set behind the surrounding mountains, the life of 31-year-old Mamie Thurman was violently snuffed out. By sunrise, news of her gruesome death would steal the headlines from the boxing world and embroil both the county and the state in a legal controversy that is debated to this very day, a controversy that some say has left a restless spirit roaming a lonely back road in an ongoing search for both answers and absolution.
Do you believe in ghosts? A recent Harris poll found that 42% of Americans say that they do indeed believe in ghosts or spirits of some kind. In the United Kingdom, the figure was even higher, with 52% of the respondents identifying themselves as believers. Now, if these figures are to be taken at face value, then it gives rise to other, more important questions. Just what is a ghost? And, if they do exist, why? While experts disagree on a precise definition, most parapsychologists are in agreement that the appearance of a ghost in whatever form is almost always the result of an unpleasant or tragic death, often involving unfinished business or a denial of justice. If this is the case, then the 1932 murder of Mamie Thurman certainly meets the criteria.
Mamie Morrison was born in Louisville, Kentucky on September 12, 1900. Around 1920, she married Louisville resident Jack Thurmond. The couple moved to the city of Logan, West Virginia around 1924. The atmosphere into which they transplanted themselves was not a peaceful one. Logan and the surrounding countryside had only recently emerged from a bitter, year-long coal strike which had escalated into all-out warfare between the forces of local coal companies and union organizers. Despite the ongoing labor unrest, Jack Thurmond was eventually able to find work as a patrolman for the Logan City Police Department. His position, while perhaps menial in nature, put both he and Mamie into contact with the society elite of Logan. This elite included those with powerful political connections, coal barons, as well as the many bankers and lenders who oversaw the financial affairs of the city and the county. The labor strife, which left a black mark on the early part of the decade, gradually gave way to what is commonly known as the Roaring Twenties. Logan, a center of commerce for the coal and timber industry, was a virtual boomtown and not immune to the party atmosphere that prevailed in cities like New York and Chicago. The era of the flapper, the speakeasy, and jazz music was everywhere to be seen, usually fueled by homebrewed liquor from the many stills which dotted the surrounding hillsides. Life was good, sometimes too good. All too often, the combination of John Barleycorn and the newly arrived spirit of promiscuity would lead to trouble. By outward appearances, Mamie Thurman was a soul of decency, known by most in the community as a strong, intelligent woman who was active in local church and business affairs. Since moving to Logan, she and Jack had resided in an apartment above a private garage behind the home of Louise and Harry Robertson. Robertson, the president of the Logan City Commission, had helped Jack Thurmond secure his position with the Logan Police Department. Robertson also worked as a bookkeeper at the nearby Guyan Valley Bank. Jack Thurmond walked the beat most commonly referred to as the graveyard shift, starting at 6 p.m. each night and ending at 6 a.m. the following morning. Thurmond later stated that he simply assumed that his wife Mamie stayed home nights while he was out. His assumption could not have been further from the truth. Unbeknownst to Jack Thurmond, his wife had acquired a taste for the finer things, along with a well-developed zest for life. Sometime around 1930, Mamie Thurman began having an affair with her former co-worker and future landlord, Harry Robertson. Often their evening trysts would take them to a newly opened and highly secret social club, reportedly located on the upper floors of the Holland Building on Stratton Avenue. There, Robertson and Thurman rubbed elbows with members of Logan's elite, their wives, their girlfriends, sometimes both. The speakeasy atmosphere of Logan's secret club was not the only locale frequented by Robertson and Thurman. On other occasions, they would be secretly driven to isolated lovers' lanes scattered about the rural countryside. Robertson never drove. Instead, he enlisted his African-American Man Friday, Clarence Stephenson, as his chauffeur. Stephenson, a native of Tennessee, came to Logan sometime around 1924. For a while, he followed the lead of most Southern blacks and found work at the Island Creek Coal Company, 8 miles south of Logan. Stephenson and Robertson soon became friends, and they would often go hunting together, Robertson doing the shooting and Stephenson seeing to the hounds. In early 1932, Stephenson moved into Harry Robertson's house along Stratton Street and made his rooms in the attic. Stephenson's precise role in the Robertsons' household was never established with absolute certainty. He was interchangeably described as Robertson's handyman, servant, and friend. Mamie Thurman kept her double life secret from both her husband and the rest of Logan for the better part of 2 years. However, the clandestine affair soon became known to Robertson's wife, Louise. While she refused to abandon him, Louise later stated that she tried desperately to talk Harry out of the affair. Failing that, Louise Robertson eventually cut all friendly ties with Mamie and Jack Thurman. Together, Harry Robertson and Mamie Thurman had woven a tightly tangled web. And yet, like all houses built of cards, theirs was more than a little shaky. It seemed only a matter of time before the house came tumbling down. June 21st, 1932. Thurman and Robertson plan another clandestine meeting for that evening, but the engagement is canceled by Robertson. At some point during the evening hours, Robertson grows uneasy. He knows that he is not the only man with whom Mamie Thurman is intimately involved. Mamie had actually given to him a list containing the names of 16 men with whom she was also having affairs. He sends Stephenson out and asks him to keep a watch for Mamie. Stephenson observed Mamie Thurman leave her apartment at around 7 p.m. and begin walking down Main Street. Upon learning of Mamie's departure, Robertson instructed Stephenson to drive to the home of Fannette Jones, who operated a boarding house on High Street. Jones's home was a popular meeting place for Robertson and Thurman, but Stephenson later reported back that he checked at the Jones residence and found no trace of Mamie Thurman. Still uneasy, Robertson says he then directed Stephenson to keep watch outside the social club. Around 9 p.m., Robertson went to join his son and others at the smokehouse to listen to the Schmaling Sharkey fight. Stephenson reportedly remained on guard outside the club from 10:45 until 11:15, but saw no sign of Mamie. According to Stephenson, he then returned to the Robertsons' home and turned in for the night. Harry and Louise Robertson stated that they each soon followed suit. A little less than 6 hours later, Jack Thurmond returned home and was alarmed to find that Mamie was not there. He called several friends as well as the area hospital, but no one had seen or heard from Mamie or had any idea where she might be. His fear growing with each passing minute, Thurmond called at Harry Robertson's home. Clarence Stephenson offered to help and proceeded to drive Jack Thurmond around Logan and the surrounding area. By now, it was early afternoon, and Jack Thurmond was blissfully unaware of events that were rapidly unfolding 8 miles to the south. Around 1 p.m., 37-year-old Garland Davis, a deaf mute, was picking blackberries along 22 Mine Road on Trace Mountain. There, about 25 feet from the side of the road, Davis happened across the lifeless body of Mamie Thurman. Her throat had been slashed from ear to ear, and she had been shot twice in the head. Davis summoned the authorities, and troopers C.B. Satterfield and C.A. Thompson from the Stallings Detachment of the West Virginia State Police responded to the scene. They were soon joined by officers from the Logan City Police as well as the Logan County Sheriff's Department. The body of Mamie Thurman was found along the left side of the road. Only thick branches from some bushes had prevented the remains from continuing over the hillside and possibly out of sight forever. Thurman's head was found facing down the hillside. She was attired in a blue dress with white polka dots. The heavy morning rain had washed away much of the blood. Officers noted that rain did not start falling in the area until after 1:30 a.m. As blue dye from Thurman's dress had bled through onto her skin, it was determined that the body had been at its present location prior to the onset of the rain. Nearby, officers found one of Mamie Thurman's shoes, a package of cigarettes, Thurman's pocketbook, which contained about $9, a worn case knife, at first conjectured to have been used to slice Thurman's throat, and a slip of paper containing what was reported to be a license plate number. Thurman's diamond wedding ring, as well as another ring of significant value, were still in place, leading investigators to surmise that robbery was not a likely motive. Other evidence at the scene included faint tire tracks, which indicated that a car had pulled off the road, stopped, and then pulled back onto the road and drove off in the other direction. Logan Chief of Police, Meade Smeltzer, who knew Mamie personally, was at the scene and made a positive identification. Thurman's body was removed from Trace Mountain and taken to what was then Harris Funeral Home in Logan. An autopsy revealed that, in all likelihood, Mamie Thurman's throat had been cut first, and she had then been shot twice just above the left ear with a .38 caliber handgun to ensure death. Owing to the heavy rains, the time of death was estimated to have been anywhere from 5 to 15 hours prior to discovery, sometime between the hours of 8 p.m. on June 21st and 6 a.m. on June 22nd. Following normal investigative procedure, Trooper Satterfield, along with other officers, went to the Thurmond residence. There, they found Harry Robertson seated on a yard bench. Robertson willingly unlocked the garage beneath the Thurmond's apartment so that officers could inspect his Ford sedan. On close inspection, Trooper Satterfield noted bloodstains beneath the driver's side floor mat as well as inside the right front window. A search of the home's basement turned up a pair of long underwear and a long straight razor, also stained with blood. Articles of clothing found in Stephenson's attic also appeared to have been stained with blood and were taken as evidence. Following these curious discoveries, Harry Robertson was arrested on the spot. He quickly admitted that only he and Clarence Stephenson had access to the vehicle. In short order, Stephenson was also arrested. Under questioning, both Robertson and Stephenson vehemently denied any involvement in Mamie Thurman's death. Each of them did, however, openly admit to having an illicit affair with her. Robertson did not hold back, stating that the affair had carried on for over 2 years. However startling this may have been, Robertson's public revelation of Logan's so-called social club caused a media sensation, and very likely more than a few cases of heartburn. While Stephenson and Robertson were being interrogated, investigators in the field were attempting to piece together the events leading up to the discovery of Mamie Thurman's body. They learned that Thurmond had apparently last been seen at around 8:30 p.m. at the Aracoma Drug Company store, where the clerk remembered her buying a pack of cigarettes. About 20 to 30 minutes earlier, she had been seen at the boarding house of Finette Jones, where she dropped off some sheets. As the investigation continued, Harry Robertson was held in the Logan County Jail for continued questioning. Initially, Clarence Stephenson was also held at the Logan County Jail. Authorities, however, feared that the charged atmosphere in Logan could possibly erupt into mob violence against him. In a move worthy of a cloak and dagger novel, Clarence Stephenson was removed from the Logan County Jail under cover of darkness and transported to a Williamson jail in neighboring Mingo County. The body of Mamie Thurman was prepped for burial at the Harris Funeral Home before being transferred to the Nibert Memorial Church. Funeral services for Mamie Thurman were held there on Friday, June 24, 1932. Pastor B.C. Gamble and Reverend Robert F. Caverly officiated at the services. Contemporary newspaper accounts state that plans were in place for Thurman's remains to be transported to her former hometown of Bradfordsville, Kentucky, the following day. Curiously, Thurman's official death certificate and the Logan County Death Register state that her burial took place on June 24, 1932, and at the nearby Logan Memorial Park. Half a century later, this one discrepancy would serve as gasoline to the flame for researchers and conspiracy theorists alike. The nearly ubiquitous rumor mill that seems to follow in the wake of any sensational events with even a whiff of scandal started churning full force. While the lovers' triangle formed by Harry Robertson, his wife, and Mamie Thurman proved to be rich fodder, accounts of Logan's so-called social club seemed to garner the most attention. Members of both the upper and lower crust seemed to hinge on every report, apparently waiting to hear if names would be named. The media fervor, perhaps accompanied by more than a little poking and prodding, eventually prompted prosecuting attorney L.P. Hager to publicly state,
"With regards to the list of members, the public is warned not to believe many of the rumors current through the community."
While the public both reveled and cringed at the sensational portions of the affair, the routine business of the official investigation continued. Bloody rags, sections of clothing, a canvas sheet, and a portion of the floor mat from Robertson's Ford were collected and sent to Charleston for analysis. The razor and pistols found at the Robertson home were also taken into evidence and sent to the state police barracks at Stallings, West Virginia. The analysis later confirmed that nearly all of the stains were human blood. Several witnesses reported seeing a man they identified as Clarence Stephenson either driving or parked along the roadway between Logan and Trace Mountain during the early dawn hours of June 22nd. One witness, Myrtle Brown of Holden, West Virginia, even stated that she heard what sounded like 2 gunshots near the area where Thurman's body would be found. Later that morning, James Murphy, an employee at a service station located across the street from the Robertsons' garage, reported seeing Stephenson open the garage door at approximately 9 a.m. Murphy added that over the course of the next 90 minutes, Stephenson backed the Ford out of the garage and then drove it back inside at least 5 times. Murphy called out to Stephenson, asking him in a joking manner what he was doing. According to Murphy, Stephenson never responded. The preliminary hearing for both Robertson and Stephenson began on the morning of Saturday, June 25, 1932. Squire L.W. Elba Hatfield brought the proceedings to order at 11 a.m. The first day of the preliminary hearing proceeded in a mostly pro forma manner. Both Stephenson and Robertson pleaded not guilty to first-degree murder. Bruce Harris of the Harris Funeral Home was called and gave a detailed account of Thurman's wounds and the appearance of her body as he observed it on Trace Mountain. State troopers and other officers who were present at the crime scene also testified before the day's proceedings concluded. The routine atmosphere of Saturday would not, however, carry over into Monday. Harry Robertson took the stand and outlined his affair with Mamie Thurman, but little in the way of new information emerged. Clarence Stephenson next took the stand. It did not take long for the fireworks to begin. When the issue concerning Stephenson's alleged relations with Mamie Thurman arose, attorneys C.C. Chambers and Emmett Skaggs reportedly locked horns in bursts of passionate oratory over the disclosure of the information. Amidst the legal wrangling, it was revealed by the state's attorney that Stephenson had written a letter to his sister, Josie Carpenter, while being held in Williamson. The letter was entered into evidence and read aloud. Williams Jail, Williams, West Virginia. Miss Josie Carper, Logan, West Virginia. Dear sister, please do all you can to help me and go to Mrs. Robertson and tell her that they have taken me to Williams to keep anyone from seeing me, but I will not tell anything to hurt Mr. Harry and her. And stand up and help me, as we all know that it is going to be hard for me and Mr. Harry. They don't know anything to hurt us. That's why they have taken me away from Logan. Tell Mr. Harry that I will die before I will lie on him and Mrs. Robertson. So please, help me. Yours truly, Clarence. The courtroom again erupted when Robertson's defense attorney, John Chafin, inquired who was paying for Stephenson's attorney. Attorney Charles Estep protested loudly, calling Chafin's tactics third-degree in nature, and asserting that it seemed to him that the hearing was being held for the benefit of the newspapers and not justice. Estep added that as Stephenson had been called by the state as a witness against Robertson, he could not be made to make statements that may implicate himself. Attorney Emmett Skaggs denied vehemently that the hearing was being conducted for show. Stephenson was eventually allowed to answer. He stated that he had engaged attorneys Chambers and Estep on his own initiative and that they were being paid by him. The voluminous information, combined with the electric atmosphere, forced the preliminary hearing to be postponed and continued several times. The hearing finally concluded on July 29th. At that time, Judge Hatfield ordered the case to be sent to the grand jury in September to decide the question of formal indictments. During the interim, the court of Logan County offered a reward of $1,000 for information leading to the arrest and conviction of Mamie Thurman's murderer or murderers. According to prosecuting attorney John Chafin, the reward was offered in a final attempt to convince reluctant witnesses or others with general information to break their silence and come forward. On September 15, 1932, following a full day of investigation, the grand jury for the fall term of the Circuit Court convened and reported its findings to Judge Naaman Jackson. Clarence Stephenson was indicted for first-degree murder. Harry Robertson was not. Stephenson demanded his right to a full trial, and the opening date was set for Monday, October 10th. Crowds surrounded the Logan County Courthouse early. Reporters from across the nation, representing both the white and black press, were on hand for what promised to be a trial celeb. By mid-morning, the courthouse hallways were jammed to capacity, and deputy sheriffs were hard-pressed to keep the anxious throngs at bay. Despite the carnival-like atmosphere, the trial got underway just after 1 p.m. Bruce Harris of the Harris Funeral Home was again the first to take the stand. Thus began an assembly line of witnesses, experts, law enforcement officials, and eventually Stephenson himself. Nearly all of those called to testify were, by this time, already familiar names to anyone with access to either a newspaper or radio. Mamie's husband Jack took the stand on the second day, called as a witness for the state. Jack Thurmond recalled having seen and spoken to Stephenson, who was seated on the steps of the Guyan Valley Bank, known locally as the Old Stone Bank, at approximately 11 p.m. Presumably, this was during the period when Stephenson was supposed to be on watch for Mamie at the behest of Harry Robertson. Thanet Jones, one of the last people reported to have seen Mamie Thurman alive on June 21st, was called to the stand, as was Logan Police Chief Meade Smeltzer, who added a curious tale. He stated that Stephenson attempted to make a run for it when he was first taken to jail in Williamson. Smeltzer testified that when Stephenson ran, he drew his gun and ordered Stephenson to stop and return. According to Smeltzer, Stephenson complied without further incident. When questioned as to why he bolted, Stephenson replied that it was simply a case of fear. Little else in the way of new or salacious information emerged during the 4-day trial. At 4:05 p.m. on Thursday, October 13, 1932, the defense rested. The prosecuting and defense attorneys each made their closing statements. At 9 p.m., the jury was sent away for deliberations. While awaiting the verdict, Clarence Stephenson was reportedly unmoved and even chatty, speaking and even laughing with some officers who were present. Stephenson is reported to have said, quote, "No matter what the verdict is, if it is for me or against me, there is just one thing I have to say. I hope they keep on searching until they find the right party. I don't believe whoever did it is here. I think they've left the country," end quote. Logan Banner, October 14, 1932. At 9:50 p.m., the jury returned its verdict: guilty of first-degree murder. Stephenson's attorney, C.C. Chambers, immediately spoke up and demanded the verdict to be set aside. Judge Naaman Jackson granted Chambers' motion and ordered that the matter be decided before the termination of the circuit court's term. Stephenson's supporters rallied to his defense. Both the local chapter of the NAACP and the Logan County Colored Civic League immediately began raising funds to enable Stephenson to have his case appealed to the West Virginia Supreme Court. Both chambers and the local organizations continuously protested that all of the evidence presented by the state was purely circumstantial. Judge Jackson upheld the jury's verdict. Stephenson was sentenced to life in prison, but was granted a 90-day stay to prepare an appeal to the state Supreme Court for writ of error. Stephenson's case was eventually heard, and the verdict was again upheld. Stephenson was taken to the West Virginia State Penitentiary in Moundsville to serve out his life sentence. Late in 1939, he was transferred to a medium-security prison in Huttonsville, West Virginia. Clarence Stephenson died of stomach cancer on April 24, 1942. By all known accounts, he maintained his innocence to the very end. As the years grew into decades, the events surrounding the murder of Mamie Thurman, as well as the trial and conviction of Clarence Stephenson, were frequently rehashed and reassessed, if not in public. Understandably, many took the court's ruling with a heavy grain of salt. In the years both preceding and following the murder, Logan County, for better or worse, had gained an unfortunate reputation for political corruptness and rampant cronyism. The involvement of so many prominent names in such a high-profile and politically charged case inevitably led to allegations that Stephenson had either been railroaded into a conviction or willingly opted to fall on the sword of justice to protect Harry and Louise Stephenson. With so many openly questioning the outcome, it was only a matter of time before the ghosts of the past returned, perhaps in more ways than one. The stretch of roadway along which Mamie Thurman's body was found is still in use today. Originally built as a private roadway by the Island Creek Coal Company, it is still known as number 22 Mine Road. Today, it branches off of U.S. Route 119, now a 4-lane highway, and still leads to a currently inactive surface mine. The Logan Memorial Cemetery, where Mamie Thurman, at least according to the state sources, was laid to rest, has not fared well with the passage of time. Here and there, the names and dates on these once impressive monuments are slowly being eroded by the elements. History fast fading into a limestone and granite oblivion. However, even if you are able to reach the hallowed grounds either by foot or vehicle, you will not see any monument marking the resting place of Mamie Thurman. The same can be said for the twisting section of number 22 Mine Road where Mamie's body was found. In the case of the roadway, this might seem normal enough. However, the absence of any memorial to Thurman where she was alleged to have been interred is not so easily explained, and could, quite possibly, account for many of the strange incidents reported by local residents over the last 80-plus years. Despite what is often portrayed in popular culture, most serious parapsychologists are firm in their conviction that cemeteries and mausoleums are illogical locations for genuine hauntings. The reason being that the final resting place of a person's mortal remains likely held little significance for them during their lifetime and, in all likelihood, played no role in their passing. They maintain that the locations most prone to paranormal activity are those that either held a powerful emotional significance to the decedent or were closely connected with their death. In short, they feel it is far more likely for the scene of a murder to be haunted rather than the place where the end result was deposited. In the case of Mamie Thurman, however, there might just be a logical link between the two. No one is quite sure just why there is no marker or stone for Mamie Thurman in Logan Memorial Park. However, in 1985, George Morrison, a half-brother of Mamie's, came to Logan hoping to pay homage to her and visit her final resting place. He was both dismayed and deeply curious when nothing to indicate the burial location could be found. Given the nature of Mamie Thurman's life and death, Morrison was understandably eager to unravel this latest knot. What was Harris Funeral Home in 1932 is now Honecker Funeral Home. Morrison, along with a reporter from the Logan Banner, did some digging and discovered that Mamie's funeral cost in 1932 came to well over $700, a substantial sum at that time. Funeral home records from 1932 also indicated that a metal marker was placed at the burial site, and the son of the former caretaker at the cemetery stated that he vividly remembered helping his father dig Mamie's grave. Also, no record of a disinterment could be found. Two longtime residents of Logan reportedly contacted Morrison. Each of them relayed slightly different stories of Mamie's remains having been illegally exhumed sometime between 1932 and 1962. At some point during this time, the metal marker placed by the Harris Funeral Home also vanished. Morrison's 1985 investigation prompted the Logan Banner and staff writer Dwight Williamson to publish an 18-part expose on Thurmond's murder and Stephenson's trial. Out of these articles came accounts and tales of a different nature, tales which strongly suggested that Mamie Thurman may not quite be resting in peace wherever she may lay. According to the 1985 expose, as well as more recent accounts, Mamie Thurman's spirit still calls 22 Mine Road home. Since shortly after her murder, her spirit has reportedly made its presence known atop 22 Mountain on many occasions. Most of the reported sightings generally tend to follow one of two common scenarios. Despite the remoteness of the location, 22 Mine Road is still traveled regularly, quite often by coal trucks, which, until recently, continued to haul the black gold from the modern surface mine. Over the years, many motorists who have traversed the winding roadway have reported seeing a woman dressed all in white walking alongside of the roadway. Feeling that the woman may be in some kind of trouble, many truck drivers, cabbies, and private citizens have been good enough to stop and offer the woman a ride. More often than not, the Good Samaritans were taken up on their offer. The woman would enter the vehicle and appear grateful for the help. The obliging motorist would drive away and then turn to make conversation with their new passenger, only to find that they were, again, the only occupants of their vehicles. According to local legend, this proverbial woman in white is the apparition of Mamie Thurman, reaching out for help from 4 generations of passerbys and somehow unable to leave the area where her body was found. While no doubt unsettling and even frightening for the unsuspecting drivers, the appearance of an ethereal spirit in distress is not an uncommon tale to students of the paranormal. Similar incidents have been reported in many other supernatural occurrences, the most famous of these perhaps being Chicago's well-known spirit, Resurrection Mary, who is also said to haunt the roadside near Resurrection Cemetery. As is the case with the Thurmond sightings, Mary is often reported to accept rides from passing cars and then vanish without a trace after a short ride. However, it has been reported that Mamie Thurman's ghost has another, far more unique way of making its presence known. According to local residents, if one is to drive along 22 Mine Road and stop their car at the bottom of the hill, a short distance past where Thurman's body was found, they are likely to experience a most unusual sensation. A vehicle, stopped and placed in neutral, will slowly begin to roll backwards up the hill, leading back to the crime scene. While many dismiss this sensation as nothing more than an optical illusion known as a gravity trap, others remain convinced that it is the spirit of Mamie Thurman, forcefully trying to bring the car and its occupants back to the place where her body was found. For those who classify themselves as believers, this action represents either a deep desire by Thurman's spirit to keep the memory of her murder alive, or as a desperate plea for help from a spiritual entity that has been trapped along an ethereal plane between this world and the next. In either case, if the accounts are to be believed, then the spirit of Mamie Thurman is somehow not satisfied with how events have played out. Perhaps she is unhappy at being dubbed the Vixen of Stratton Street following her murder and portrayed as a loose, happy-go-lucky flapper. Perhaps she's trying to say that justice was somehow not served following her death, and that either Stephenson was innocent of her murder, or that others were involved who were never punished. Or perhaps, in this one instance, the appearance of Thurman's spirit is, indeed, linked to her burial site, or, more accurately, the apparent lack thereof. The 1985 articles in the Logan Banner indicate that the Logan Memorial Cemetery was thoroughly searched on several occasions, both before and during the publication of the serialized accounts. Today, Logan Memorial Cemetery appears much as it was reported to be in 1985, thick with overgrowth and weeds, and devoid of any memorial to Mamie Thurman. On the off chance that searchers in 1985 may have somehow overlooked Thurman's burial location, Mysteriouswv traveled to the small community of McConnell and paid a visit to the Logan Memorial Cemetery. If anything, the intervening 33 years have been even crueler to the grounds than the previous 53. Fallen trees, thick vines, and the unmistakable work of vandals have left this once impressive hillside location looking more like a lost jungle city than a 20th century perpetual care cemetery. Stones have been overturned. Brick and stone mausoleums are crumbling back to earth, and, in some places, the soft, moist surface ground has once again assumed the unmistakable shape of a freshly dug grave. However, despite the encroaching forest and the fast-growing verge, most of the markers themselves, while often covered by tall grass and leaves, remain clear and legible once the covering is brushed aside. Also, in at least 3 locations, we were able to clearly observe metal markers emblazoned with the name Harris. 2 of these thin metal plaques are still perfectly legible and date to 1960 and 1965, respectively. As these relatively cheap markers are left behind immediately following internment, it is simply a matter of basic arithmetic to conclude that these 2 markers are 58 and 53 years old. In 1985, both the Honecker Funeral Home and the son of a former caretaker reported that Thurman's grave was marked with one of these plain metal plates. At that time, the marker, if still in place, would have been 53 years old, 5 years younger than one of the markers we observed during our recent search. Also, prior to World War II, it is likely that a thicker and more durable metal would have been utilized as opposed to the aluminum-like material bearing the dates 1960 and 1965. Although conditions were far from ideal during our 2018 visit, the general location of Thurman's grave, as recalled by the caretaker's son in 1985, was easily reached by foot. Following the 1985 account, the burial grounds immediately above and below a large stone crypt bearing the family name Steele were gone over twice, in addition to a foot search of all accessible areas of the hillside cemetery. Many ornate and simple markers dating to the 1920s, 30s, and 40s were found. Most of them were clearly legible. None of them bore the name of Mamie Thurman. In contrast, a simple online search easily revealed the burial location of Mamie's husband. Alvin Jack Thurmond died in 1957 and is today buried in the Liberty Cemetery in Bradfordsville, Kentucky, Mamie Thurman's hometown, and, according to the Logan Banner and the Harris Funeral Home, her final resting place as well. Although reported to be only 63% complete, the online resource listed no burial site or stone for Mamie Thurman. Does the restless spirit of Mamie Thurman continue to trod the remote location where her lifeless body was found? Is she displeased that history has often painted her as a woman of abandoned character and an unfaithful disposition? Is she trying to tell us that there is more to her death than was brought to light in 1932? Is she trying to say that Clarence Stephenson was innocent and a victim of a miscarriage of justice? Is she perhaps trying to say that he did not act alone and that others, perhaps equally responsible for her untimely demise, have gotten away with murder for 86 years? Or Is Mamie Thurman angry that her burial site has been lost to time and possibly desecrated, thus leaving her living relatives with no certain way of honorably marking her final resting place?
In 1996, Dwight Williamson, author of the 1985 expose, told the Charleston Gazette that he kept in touch with George Morrison Jr. until 1987. Morrison later wrote a book about the affair entitled, aptly, The Ghost of 22 Mountain. The 1985 Logan Banner articles reportedly brought many local residents out of the darkness for the first time in years. Most of them, while remaining anonymous, stated that they had not spoken openly of the affair since 1932. Strong testament either to a deep revulsion of the bad memories or a fear of reprisals powerful enough to span the decades and the waves of social change that were not long in coming. Now, many of the names that you have heard in this feature, Hatfield, Chambers, Jackson, Chafin, remain just as prevalent in the local vernacular today as they were in 1932. While it seems unlikely that we will ever be able to completely lift the fog of time that surrounds Thurmond's murder, there seems at least an outside chance that part of this unique slice of West Virginia history can still be solved. For it is a basic law of physics that neither the bodies of the deceased nor their tombstones can imitate a ghost and simply vanish into thin air. Also, as over $700 in funeral costs was paid by Jack Thurmond in 1932, it seems a foregone conclusion that Thurmond's remains were interred somewhere. But where? If Thurmond's spirit is haunting 22 Mountain, then perhaps one of our viewers can supply that one vital bit of information which may help to free her from her 86-year purgatory.
The Logan County Death Register, along with Mamie Thurman's official state death certificate, state that she was buried in the Logan Memorial Cemetery. This cemetery is located in the small, unincorporated community of McConnell, about 100 yards off of what was, until very recently, West Virginia Route Number 10. In 1985, the son of the cemetery's former caretaker recalled that Thurmond was buried there in Section B, an area he stated was located between the Steele family crypt and the cemetery entrance. Along with the Harris Honecker Funeral Home records, the caretaker's son also recalled that Thurmond's grave was marked with a metal funeral marker in 1932, and that no stone or other memorial was ever placed there. Newspaper accounts at the time state that Thurmond's remains were to be transported by rail to her former hometown of Bradfordsville, Kentucky, over 100 miles away. It was reported in 1985 that some of the Honecker Funeral Home records also stated that Thurmond's remains were to be transported to Bradfordsville. Mamie's widower, Jack Thurmond, is buried in the Old Liberty Cemetery in Bradfordsville, Kentucky. His tombstone lists his full name as Alvin Jack Thurmond and indicates that he died in 1957. He may have remarried at some point in his life. His second wife's name may have been Clara, and it has been speculated that Jack Thurmond may have spent his final years in a mental health facility. Mamie Thurman's maiden name was Morrison. According to her death certificate, her father's name was George Morrison. In 1985, Mamie's half-brother, also named George Morrison, reported that George Morrison Sr. died in Ashland, Kentucky in 1928. George Morrison Jr. also stated that he had two older sisters in 1932, and that Jack Thurmond came to visit them in a Kentucky orphanage following Mamie's death. If you feel that you can shed any light on the final resting place of Mamie Thurman, please post your information in the comments section below or contact the West Virginia State Archives via the email address listed in the description.